Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up. Nothing can stop me.
All the way up.
Anyways, good morning, Vietnam. I'm your host, Meyer Dalal. Welcome to the Money Matrix. We have our resident
Californian. Yes, Alan Hastings here.
So we had some interesting stuff go on these last couple of days. I think we really need to shed some light on it. What are your thoughts on this whole Israel, Iran, U.S. situation?
Well, first things first, I hear the news. I'm thinking, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for the region in the future? But the second thing is, well, how does this affect the economy? Because we saw some really interesting numbers as a reaction. So I'm really hoping you can break down how the market reacted, because my first thought is this is the time to invest. But apparently it is. Sorry, but go on.
Traditionally, in times of war and political unrest, there's a flight to quality. There's a flight to bonds, and stocks sell off and everything sells off. And that's traditionally the way it's been. But this pattern right now that we're seeing is completely opposite.
Right.
And rates went up, and the 10-year went up. Before Israel bombed Iran on June 12th, the 10-year bond was at 436. And I think as of yesterday, we're at 445. It came down a little bit. It was stronger earlier, but now it's back. It lost a lot of its gains that it made. So this is contradictory to what normally is happening. So when you really look into it and peel the layers back and you wonder, what are the key factors? What are people really looking at? That's something that is interesting. The first thing everyone is looking at and talking about is the energy markets. On Friday, oil prices surged to their biggest gains since the onset of the Russia war with Ukraine. Right now, if we look at it, that was more than 3 years ago. West Texas Intermediate crude jumped 7.3% to $73.12 per barrel, and Brent crude hit $74.23.
Right.
So this is the craziest. There's a chief U.S. economist, Ryan Sweet. He said, he's from Oxford Economics, he said that every $10 increase in oil prices could result into a 0.5 percentage point increase in the inflation rate. That's a direct hit to American consumers. So basically, what are we at, 2.3% now? We could go to 2.9% for every $10 increase in oil. That's crazy.
That's an insane number.
People were saying oil could jump to $100. So that's really scary, because who knows what would happen there.
Yeah, I think that inflation is the immediate effect that everybody cares about. Inflation has been this number that we've been tracking and focused on for months now. And we've become so leery about it because of Donald Trump's tariffs and all of the different Fed meetings and everybody doing this and saying that, and Chairman Powell not giving us interest rate breaks. So our first thought should be, if that happens, if those oil prices skyrocket, if the inflation number goes up, what does that exactly mean for interest rates? Because if the correlation is as severe as Ryan Sweet is saying, that's a massive amount of difference in inflation that we could see.
Yeah, for sure. And really, all of it is based on this one region. What they say, I think it's 25 miles or something like that. The coast of Tormuz, or the Avenue of Tormuz, whatever it's called.
You talking about they're sealing it off or something?
No, Iran said they're going to stop oil production. Iran is 25% of all oil production. Trump tweeted on Truth Social to the other oil-producing countries, don't be afraid. This is all just a bully tactic. You got to keep producing. Everything's got to be, we got to keep oil as low as possible, because, you know, he's obviously concerned too. And then locally on our side, he's telling everyone, drill, baby, drill. Make sure you keep drilling, because we need to extract all that oil that we can on our side. So he's obviously understanding the effects of it too and seeing what's going on. But if you think about it from just a straight on look, why does oil prices affect so much? But if you break it down, gas runs everything in the U.S. Every logistics, every supply chain, everything you look at is all related to oil and what happens on the cost of oil.
Transportation, manufacturing, even heating, right? Like we're talking about every step of every product that enters our lives is affected by the price of gas, everything.
So if you look at all aspects of the economy, it's going to get hit. If you really break it down and look at the effects, I know a couple of companies already started saying that the higher energy prices could lead to elevated costs. One of these companies here, where was it? Oh, yeah. Walmart already raised prices on goods and said it's going to have to do it again if it continues for back to school shopping. And back to school shopping is going to come right around the corner. And if this thing gets prolonged, it's going to be a problem. Smucker's, the jam company, right? The Smucker's, that's the one that they make
School
the jam.
lunches. Yeah.
They also said that they're going to have to raise because of that, but they're just beyond the jam. They have all sorts of other products that fold into their thing. So you're talking about transportation, you're talking about manufacturing, you're talking about everything.
Yeah. And I think the serious discussion to be had is we just had this Fed meeting where Chairman Powell said basically, I'm taking it slow. Here we are now, the next weekend, the Federal Reserve's got to think about what to do if inflation, which is based heavily on energy and energy costs, how are they going to manage the reaction? They have to maintain inflation, they have to keep inflation away, but at the same time, they have to support the labor market. And it's going to be hard if prices for gas, food, essentials, all these things are going to be affected by this one energy item. If that's affecting every portion of the economy, how are they going to balance the job labor market and the inflation at the same time?
If you look at it from the Fed's perspective, everything is data dependent, right? It's a 1 month lag on everything. This week, the personal consumption expenditures numbers come out, and that's a direct economic inflationary point that they use. You had Fed Waller today and a couple of other Fed chairs saying if the numbers are good, we feel confident that July will give us a rate cut, where that's the first time they've said that, because rate cuts for the whole year was off the table up until just what they said today. But now with this impact, that could change, because if they're so data dependent, the immediate effect is not going to be now. It's going to be in a month from now, or depending on how prolonged of a situation that is. So it really puts the Fed in a very difficult position, because at the end of the day, if you just look at the numbers here, so a $10 increase in the price of gas, which means inflation will go from 2.4 to 2.9. Families spending on average $5,000 a month in necessities, that's an extra $300 per year in cost. Multiply that by 130 million households, you're looking at $39 billion that's sucked out of the economy for just $10.
That's actually crazy.
And if oil hits $100 a barrel, it's nuts. I mean, they're talking about $8, $9 gas prices. California's dead. You have to be riding your bike to the office.
That's right. I think a thing to note, too, is we talked a lot about the big, beautiful bill, and it's still not passed. But the idea is that we're getting a lot more allocated to the defense budget, right? What if this conflict turns into a real conflict, right? What if instead of Iran backing down after this situation where we attacked them and they retaliated, what if it escalates? Does that help the economy if our defense spending goes up? Because that's money moving in, right? Am I wrong to think that?
No, but
jobs created.
Yeah. But again, there's a checks and balances to that, because that's a very gradual progression. You're not going to feel that immediately. So you're not going to see that immediately. But the oil prices go up as an immediate hit.
Right.
Everything is immediate. But I saw something that really shed so much light on what's happening here. The guy, Sam Couture from Freddie Mac, he's their chief economist. He just came out and said, I think the new normal is 67%.
Wow.
In a world with strong growth and steady inflation. So if he's thinking 6 to 7% is normal, that's a whole reset on a lot of people's thinking. I mean,
the standards
if you look at
changed.
it, so if you put it into perspectives, if mortgage rates stay at 67%, so what does that mean for your purchasing power? If you're looking at a $500,000 home and you're putting down 20%, if you were getting mortgages at 3-4%, you could afford a $500,000 home. But that same affordability now, if you look at it, that $500,000 is only $350,000.
Right.
That really changes everything. Now let's look at what happens to the demand. What happens to the supply of homes? You have 60% of the market and 4% are better rates. So if 6 to 7 is the new normal, they're really not moving unless you have to. Your home prices are still going to be here because you don't have any real supply coming into the market. Home builders have slowed down their building because of all these concerns and fears. So you have elevated prices, affordability is down, and then what?
Construction also down. So supply, because the first thing you'd note would be you're not going to have supply, right? So prices are going to go up. But then if prices go up, the affordability is already a problem. So we're not going to see buyers either. This is going to be a tough couple of years if this is the case. But if you look at 6 to 7% as a new normal, is what investors have been working under those parameters for the last 3 years anyway. Like we've been doing refis at 10.
You have a couple of ways this could go, right? We could see from just what President Trump said today, Iran shot 15 missiles at the Qatar base in Qatar right outside of Doha. And he said it was a weak attempt at a retaliation just to show they're not backing down. And he feels they're going to come to the table. So you have one option. They come to the table and everything gets put to bed. You have a new political regime in Iran. Oil production is controlled. Everything is controlled because the former Shah's son is ready to go back into power. So that's one option. It could go completely sideways where they're fighting in battles and oil production stops, and then we see that. Or the third is it just keeps going back and forth and they ping pong and just becomes a prolonged situation.
Yeah.
Those are the things that people are really worried about now because what's going to happen there. And what we're seeing is even one of our loan officers said this morning, he had a couple of contracts fall out.
Yeah.
Of people buying, like purchasing. But meanwhile, we're seeing a huge uptick in investors buying.
Yes.
Because every time there's that fear, they go in and they buy up. What are your thoughts? Where do you see this option happening?
If I really had to be placing money on it, I would say option one is the most likely. Maybe even not with a regime change, but like enough political pressure from different angles is going to cause this to end. And I don't think that it's going to be a big bloodbath because in reality, it would be like David and Goliath, except David has one arm and no legs. Iran can't physically compete. So I really do think it won't be a long conflict. And I think that you're right. Investors are already taking advantage of previous market fears from labor problems, from shortage of buyers, from shortage of sellers. I don't think that investors are staying out of it anyway. I don't think fear is going to be a problem. 6 to 7% is already what they're used to. So ultimately, the people who are really affected are first-time home buyers, people trying to move houses, like families who want to upgrade or whatever. Those people are paused, but I don't think it's going to affect investors.
I spoke to a young couple. She's pregnant. She just graduated school, looking to buy their first starter home. They make about $100,000 combined, but unfortunately, she's got $63,000 in student loan debt, paying $995 a month. Their affordability is not there anymore. Rates have doubled from 2020. People earning capacity hasn't doubled. It's gone up, but definitely not doubled. She's making $63,000 in her new job, which is great, but they can't afford to buy a home.
I think that's a big, like Ronan keeps bringing up that point when he's on the pod, and I'd love to have him on because I want to talk about that a little bit, is that like people don't want to buy houses now. I don't think that's the case. I think the problem is the affordability is just not there. Even for these people who went to a good school, to get a good education, to get a good job, it set them back so much that their good job is outweighed by their student debt. So yeah, it's very tough for those people for sure.
Yeah. But hey, listen, at the end of the day, there's always silver lining, in my opinion. You always have to.
Long it'll be worth it.
You can look at it and say, this is opportunity. It's up to you how you look at it and how you treat it. Eventually, it's all going to work itself out. If it goes up and inflation hits, it hits. Our life has to move on, and we have to keep moving forward. The message is no matter what, you have to deal, and real estate has always proven to be the safest investment over a long haul. And
Yeah.
if you're in a situation where you can afford to buy it. If you're an investor, there are more opportunities now than ever.
Yeah.
You know,
I completely
people
agree.
are
I think the
scared.
investors are
Sellers are negotiating. We're seeing deals get done on multi-million-dollar properties where sellers are paying $100,000 towards closing costs and lowering the purchase price of the home. There's opportunity.
I've seen this week alone 3 appraisals come in over value on purchases, and it's purely because sellers want to sell. Now
We're closing one for one of our investors, a regular investor, property here in Florida. In his purchase price is $600,000. The appraisal came in at $750,000, and the market of the sellers were just panicked. They got stuck holding the property. It was supposed to be a flip, and granted, he has to do a little bit of work to get it to ultimately cash flow it the way he wants or sell it. But either way, he's got $150,000 in equity built in. And he was
just from buying the house.
And you know, the best part is he got the deal because he went in with no loan contingency, just an appraisal contingency. We had underwritten his loan already. We had got him a pre-approval where there's no loan contingency. It was just a straight, like a cash offer.
The agility advantage. Just out of curiosity, because we ask this question every few months now, do you see interest rates coming down in July or at all this year?
I definitely see them coming down this year. I don't know if July is realistic. I think probably September, in my opinion, is more realistic. And I think it's more for the consumer sentiment to bring back that positivity into the market. Trump last week was saying you need to bring it down 2.5 points. It would be great, but it would also cause panic and mayhem. But I definitely do think that the Fed is right to be worried. But at the end of the day, the tariff concerns haven't really come into play the way they felt that they would. And we're not seeing that effect come in. And that was one of their biggest concerns. So I think overall, if we can get a good PCE number this week, that's what we're really banking on, is that where we'll be able to, at the end of the day now, come in and say, okay, this is stable. The market seems stable. And this whole Iran thing gets de-escalated and sorts itself out.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, the good thing is their nuclear capabilities is pretty much done. Is that safe to say?
I don't want to get too political about it, but if mission accomplished, then we're done. That's it.
So we shall see. But this was great. Not too long, not too drawn out, which is nice. And on to the next one, my friend.
Perfect.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way up.